There's usually a big disconnect between the words that we're using and the maturity of where we are. And a big fear of mine is we risk leapfrogging in this industry and getting to a stage where we're now talking about subjects that are far up here, yet we haven't got the foundations right. And without that, we are going to topple. And we start getting into a space where it becomes a bit of a question of, is it too silly to ask this question? So I want to go back to basics and understand how can we build a stable security monitoring platform. And to do that, first I just want to take us back in history. I want to make everyone, including myself, feel old. So we'll take a bit of a historic look at the evolution of attacks. Then I want to go into the SOC visibility triad, which I'm sure some of you may or may not have heard about, which will cover log monitoring, network monitoring, and endpoint monitoring. And then I want to go into the 3 Ps, which is, of course, people, process, and partners, and ultimately how it's not just technology that helps us in our security operations. Hopefully, if we've got time, we can go into a Q&A. Otherwise, we are here with the booth ourselves, and you can come and ask those questions then. So, to get started, the evolution of attacks. To give you an idea, the first attack that was really written into the books was all the way back in 1986, which was created in Pakistan. And this was actually more of a copyright infringement prevention more than anything. It was called Brain. And what that meant is every time someone was illegally copying someone's software, it ultimately didn't act as they'd hoped it to act. But then we move on very swiftly onto the Morris worm, 1988. And unfortunately, Robert Morris was the first person to get charged under the Computer Misuse Act. And the reality was there was no real malice behind that. It was simply a question of what is possible. And that's what he really wanted to understand. But where things start getting a bit sketchy, so to speak, is after we see the internet explosion, we start getting into the noughties. And that's where we really see things becoming about free access and personal gain, or it's being done with malicious intent. So we start seeing things such as the Mafia Boy, we see AOL losing millions of customers' credentials and information with credit cards, TK Maxx, huge breach, and then the big turning point is 2010, Stuxnet, the Olympic Games. I'm sure everyone remembers that, right? That was pretty much news every day for a solid week, if not longer. But really what that was the game changer for is this was really the first thing, in my opinion, that brought cybersecurity to the mainstream media. All of a sudden, I had my dad who used to look bamboozled if I ever mentioned anything about a computer. He was involved in the conversation. He was talking about it in how is this going to affect us from a global standpoint. Then we see something even worse. Even the security companies are not safe. RSA, Lockheed Martin, they start to become a target of these attacks. And we go on and so forth. And the next big one is, of course, WannaCry. Once again, another huge thing in the media. And the scary thing, more than anything about ransomware, is we're still talking about it. It's 6 years later, and a type of attack we're still talking about. We have all these advanced technologies for detection, all these advanced technologies for prevention, yet we're still talking about it. And that's something that is only going to get worse now that there is ransomware as a service. All it takes nowadays is a disgruntled employee to go and pay for a service of ransomware as a service, and that will shut your business down. And then, of course, I've just brought up to 2020 basically there with BA. But something that's also starting to change in this is our mindset. Of course, there's a lot of the time we talk to you as if it's about your business, etc. But let's flip this round. Let's think about this as your data. How many people here, hands up, second guess entering their email address and signing the yes, I will create an account and entering the password button? Who does that now? Yeah, pretty much everyone second guesses that now. Do I trust this company with my data? So who's to say people aren't asking that about your businesses? How is this affecting your digital transformation and all of the various different transformational projects that you're working with. So, of course, getting onto the SOC visibility triad. Now, back in 2015, Anton Chvaukin had this blue sky thinking idea, and it was the SOC visibility triad. Now, and this is a great example of how, as well, the defenses evolve. And that's simply because back when he had this ideology, SIM was grossly expensive. Affording a SIM solution was pretty much, you had to really figure something out smart to talk to the budget holders and be able to get them to sign that off. You had, of course, network detection response, which wasn't really a thing. And then endpoint detection response was basically Kaspersky, which, no offense. But of course, nowadays, you have some fantastic technologies. You've got CrowdStrike. Of course, you've got a plethora of SIM tools out there. And of course, yes, LogRhythm. We do, of course, offer in that NDR and UEBA in SIM space. But really, I want this to be more educational about just any SIM, any NDR platform. But the ideology is when we start combining all three, we start getting overlapping fields of strength in prevention. We get, of course, the breadth from SIM, and we get that vast visibility. We get the speed of visibility from the network detection response, and then we get the depth of visibility with, of course, the endpoint detection response. So what was a 300 to 400 word blog post, probably written at night over a glass of red wine, has now become actually, and he originally named it the nuclear triad, has now become really the pinnacle of any basis of any SOC monitoring platform. So to delve in a bit more into the benefits of course, each of these cornerstones. Now, of course, there is always the starting point. You always need to start with one of them, and that's simply down to your organization's requirements. If it's a vast working from home environment, EDR might be your choice. If, of course, you have various different deployments across multiple parts of the UK or the world, that would be SIM. And then, of course, just making sure that you have that fast and resilient detection on the network, wherever that may be, that's the NDR. But starting is completely your choice. But for me, with log monitoring, and as I mentioned, SIM, I've been involved in the industry for quite a while now in that terms. And we'll go into some of the challenges with SIM and how to avoid that as well. But the reality is with SIM, that's where we do get that breadth of visibility. We start pulling in from the endpoint. We pull in from networking. We pull in from, of course, the third-party systems, such as it could be SAP, and your business intelligence data can be brought in. Gaining that full correlation capability across your Mac with your Linux, with your Windows, across that on top of all the other different virtualization technologies that we see, all these various different microservices that we're seeing more and more as well in the cloud, and being able to pull that in together in one platform and give you an understanding of what is happening. The second thing, which unfortunately we just can't ignore anymore, is compliance organizations love SIM. There is often the time, and I've seen it so much in my time, it's a tick box exercise for a lot of people. They need to tick it off for GDPR, from some form of PCI agreement, whatever it may be. We then move on to endpoint monitoring. So we've got the breadth of detection with, of course, SIM. We then move on, of course, to the endpoint monitoring. And the reality here is this is where we want to start getting that depth. This is, for example, being able to protect those users that are 35,000 feet in the air, they're connected to British Airways Wi-Fi, and they're browsing they're browsing the webs, they're browsing their emails, they're downloading attachments, they're enabling macros, all these different various threat vectors. So they are still at risk, even at 35,000 feet. So having the depth of visibility with these guys and the protection is, of course, vital in that sense. So, of course, agent-based, which is a slight challenge because we do now know that bidding is live on the dark web of understanding about what tools does an organization use. If I understand what tools someone's using, I know how to disable that tool. You may have a Silence, a CrowdStrike, whatever it may be, but if someone preemptively knows that and has done their reconnaissance, they will preemptively come to the battle and they will simply just disable that. And someone once said something to me which was a real eye-opener. Defenders, we have to be perfect 100% of the time. Attackers only need to be perfect once. And that's something that we always need to think about. Sometimes we may feel a bit OCD as security professionals, and we may feel a bit tight on certain policies, etc., but we need to, because all it takes is one successful breach. And then the final thing is, of course, the network monitoring. Now, this is where the whole packets don't lie. You know, Shakira said her hips don't lie, we say the packets don't lie. And the reality is with network detection response, and the reason we talk about the speed here, is when we think about whatever we do, it's usually always first involving a communicational packet on a network. Whether it's trying to do some lateral movement, whether it's even just trying to understand if an endpoint is on the network, it starts with the network. And that's where that speed of visibility comes in. Another huge, huge advantage is the invisible factor. So the NSA big guns, the superstars, known as the Tailored Access Operations Group. I was once at one of these events and was listening to a former director, and he was talking about some of the missions that he would have to do, and there were some really interesting things that he was saying. And when asked in relation to the SOC visibility triad, what is he most scared of? His response was this. It was simply the network monitoring aspect. Why? Well, especially in larger organizations, it's guaranteed they have a SIM. Okay, so first and foremost, I need to make sure that I disable logging. The second thing is like I mentioned, you can buy lists of which organizations are using which tools. So I understand what EDR tool I need to disable. Network monitoring is passive. There is no way for him to know that that is on the network. There's no way to understand, is there an NDR platform sitting there monitoring his every move? He doesn't know that. And that was one of the reasons why he was most scared of this technology. And he would say it's actually safer for the United States that he doesn't get in at all versus getting in, doing what he needs to do and getting out, but being spotted. So that was where network monitoring was really there. And just a heads up that we do sometimes hear about some NDR platforms wanting to unencrypt your data. I don't know why anyone would want a platform that's meant to secure them to make them less secure. Don't allow that. A good platform is going to have technology such as GA3 fingerprinting, which was made by Salesforce, and they will be able to still tell you what is happening in that packet, encrypted or not. So we've talked about the triad there, and we've talked about the technology, really. Now we get to the 3 Ps, the people, process, and partners. Now, process is, of course, key. And we're in a circle of honesty here. And even as, like I say, I've been working in the SIM space for the best part of a decade, who's tried the kitchen sink approach? We bought a SIM, we bought network monitoring, we bought something, and we threw everything at it. We didn't filter the logs. Yeah, come on. There's no shame here. We can all put our hands up. At some point, we've all done this. We just send every bit of log, and we get excited, and we say, oh, how easy is this? He just points syslog to it. Wow. And then we start realizing, well, now I have all this noise. What do I care about? What do the organization that I'm working for care about? What is it that an attacker would care about? What do they want from my organization? Understanding, for example, if you have any supply chain or any competitors that have recently been breached, what did they take from them? What did they disable? Okay, that's probably something that I'm going to be affected by at some point. So that's what I need to start understanding and threat modeling around. What do I care about? How do we detect? And how do we block? Of course, something that I also really want to emphasize with processes. Once again, something I've done. You buy a SIM, you ingest everything, and then the SIM vendor says, look at how many alerts we've pre-made for you. And you go, brilliant. And you tick every single box. And then next thing you know, You've got your Exchange server flashing red saying, oh my God, what's all this? And you've just got constant alerts coming in. Once again, half of them, if not 99% of them, you don't care about. So ensuring that you selectively choose what you're alerted about, but more importantly, doing this gives you time to think about how do you want to react. There should be no alert in any of your tools, no matter what monitoring it's doing. There shouldn't be a single alert without you having something predefined as a playbook of how do I respond. It's as simple as that. Now, of course, some of them, we have some examples that people have used LogRhythm to monitor key access, and they tell when the dinner lady is logged in, and they know when the sandwich cart is arriving. That one probably doesn't need a playbook, but that is the general consensus. And then the final one I actually dipped in when FortiGate was speaking, and they were talking about, of course, the cyber kill chain, but aligning yourself to one of these standards as soon as possible is also highly beneficial. It's not only highly beneficial because a lot of the work's done for you, it's also highly beneficial for your team's mental health, because they're going to understand the standard in which they need to work to. And it's also going to be very easy for you from a hiring perspective. If you start hiring people and you say, yep, we align ourselves to various different standards within the NIST framework, etc., they're going to know it, and they're going to get that, and they're going to know how to work within your team very quickly. See it as a language, right? Usually you say must be, speaking this language, that language, da-da-da-da-da. Also, we need you aware of this framework. People. So, of course, usually in the actual SOC, we usually have various different levels. We have the first level, which is, of course, usually the interns, the people that have just come out of university. They're there to triage any information and try and get that information together. Level 2 is, of course, looking at the response side of things, while level 3 is that escalation point, but they also do some manual threat hunting, etc. So having some standards, once again, about who's responsible for what allows for an efficient team. Second thing is, specialist tools require specialists. Who knows how to use a pair of scissors? I'd be very disappointed if I'm not seeing everyone's hands up here. We've got a serious problem there. The people that put their hands up, which should be everyone, if you look to the left and the right of you, who would trust the other person in cutting their hair? Some are easier than others, but the reality is we wouldn't, because we'd want to trust a barber or a hairdresser, a specialist of that tool. So why do we expect someone in networking to be a wizard with a security events platform? Why do we expect security guys to fully know the ins and outs and configure network detection at a high level? We need to ensure that we're assigning the right tools to the right trade. And the final one in this for the people, and once again, this is really going to help their mental health, is provide the training. It's so easy, once again, like I was talking about even with my speech, it's so easy for us to leapfrog and just expect people to catch up. But the reality is people are learning, people are new to the industry at all times, there's new technologies at all times. We should always be investing in that training. Saying on-the-job training and, hey, we give you a week to use the platform isn't training. They need to fully understand how to utilize that platform and gain the most out of it. And the last thing is, we talked about the evolution of attacks. There has been an evolution in defense, no doubt about it. But then we start coming to challenges with that ourselves. It's keeping up. I sometimes even find myself in the industry, I see new logos every time I go to conferences, and I'm thinking, what do these guys do? I didn't know I needed that, but apparently I do. And the reality is this is where partners really do come in to their strengths. Because partners are out there to really help and guide and educate you in where do you need to put your time and investments. They can also help you become a bit more realistic. It's easy to stand on any stage and say, yep, you need to invest in these 3 technologies. You need 3 guys triaging. You need 3 guys responding. All of a sudden, the budget for the people and the head count is far superior than anything in the organization. at times we need to accept where we are as businesses and as teams. We may need to bring in some outsourcing. We may need to bring in an MSSP. So working with the right partner and finding a partner that you trust to work with can guide you through all those technologies we just seen, but also help you implement them and maintain them. Most importantly, I've seen it far too many times where someone has brought some fantastic technology into a business, and it gets configured, and then it just sits there. And the value and the return of investment just continues to plummet. But there's just too much for that person to deal with, so they don't have time to sit there maintaining these rules, maintaining the updates and patching and various different whitelists, blacklists. It's very hard for them to do that. Now, and the final thing I really want to talk about is, of course, we discussed the SOC visibility triad, but that is not, of course, the be-all and end-all. It's not a silver bullet. It's a great foundational platform. Things such as threat intelligence are a force multiplier. We have threat intelligence here today, of course, with Recorded Future. Applying that to network detection response, applying it to SIM, applying it to EDR, really emphasizes the capabilities of course, that detection capability. And of course, the quicker we detect, the quicker we respond. So this would be my key basis. Like I say, I wanted this to be more of an educational piece than anything. Of course, we as LogRhythm do supply that SIM and that NDR piece, but if you're not careful, choosing the wrong technologies, I mean, it could end up in a bit of a car crash. I don't believe Darktrace are here today to defend themselves anymore. Never mind. So, I appreciate, we've got 5 minutes left, potentially. So, like I said, if there's anyone who has a question, I'm here. If you would prefer to ask that question, of course, through the other room, that's also fine. Going once, going, yep.
Thank you for the prompt to reread Anton's paper.
Yeah.
He points to the lack of AppSec monitoring in his model.
Yeah.
Have you seen a model that does incorporate that as an upgrade to his model?
I think, personally myself, no. So essentially, there was the gap of AppSec monitoring with Anton Javaukin's nuclear triad, and have I seen any that includes that? And for myself, the answer is no. It's not to say there isn't one out there. What I do traditionally find is a lot of people take the basis of Anton's triad, and then, of course, they wrap around, and like, say, we talk about force multipliers of threat intelligence, automated response with the likes of swim lane and various other technologies. But good question. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah? Can you give an... So do you mean as in, for example, attacks on the SIM platform itself, or?
Yes, all the feeds coming into the management feeds, exports coming via API. So that plane, as opposed to the data plane where we talk a lot about looking into the packets, breaking down all stuff, but it is entirely separate.
Yeah, and this is, it's a very good question. This is almost why you end up with, for example, that triad, because the question was essentially, what about when it's not the monitored platforms that are being attacked, it's when the monitoring platforms are being attacked, was the question. And it's, once again, a great question. But this is why you have the three kind of pillars and the three within that triad. Because if your SIM were under attack, as an example, the ideology is you'd have network detection response that's monitoring that, detecting that, and also trying to respond to that and blocking that. So you've always got an overlap of coverage. Same with your endpoints, etc. So while your SIM may be attacked, not great, but guess what? The users on their workstation are still secure in that form and manner. So this is where that defense in depth really comes in, with having those three tools plugging in together. The question? Anyone else? My email is there as well, so if anyone that wants to dash or has a question at a later date, please feel free to email me. But like I say, I'll actually just be on the LogRhythm stand just outside as well. So I really, really appreciate all of your attention. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, I hope to see you guys at the LogRhythm stand.